Hey, what's up, Rattlers? So, of the monitor species that are most well known here in Australia, the red Ackie is probably one of the most well known, and in this video I'm going to travel from one end of the red Accie's range to the other. It's a pretty huge range here in Australia, but I'm going to do a little bit of traveling, and I'm going to look into how the red Ackie is living out here in Australia, so that we better know how to care for them in our homes. I'm Dāv Kaufman, and I am obsessed with reptiles, so come with me and join my Reptile Adventures.
At Zilla, we are dedicated to the innovation of caging, lighting, and equipment solutions that provide proper husbandry for your pet's long and happy life. To see our entire catalog, visit zillarules.com.
So red Ackies have been called the perfect starter monitor lizard. They don't get very big, and adult size is only about 30 inches at a max. I swallowed a fly. So this is the habitat of the red Ackie here in Australia. This is the proper outback, or the red center of Australia. So it's midday right now, and the temperature is really hot. And Ackies will only come out and start basking on all the rocks here in the desert when it's super hot. So it's about 11 o'clock in the morning right now, and I'm going to take some temperature readings here in a little bit to illustrate just how hot it gets and the temperatures at which Ackies will come out and start to bask. So this is where the Ackies are hanging out. So you have the outback here with all the acacia trees and the spinifex grass that cuts into your feet when you walk past it, but then you have these rocky outcroppings in the middle of this grassland here, and it's on top of these rocks that the Ackies will come and bask.
Ackie time.
All right. A little acanthurus. All right, look at this. This is absolutely ridiculous. Brian is covered with flies. Troy is covered with flies. The only thing not covered with flies is the Ackie. Hey, nice catch there, buddy. So the weather here in Australia this time of year can really change on a dime. It can be calm and sunny and in the 80s, and then the next minute the clouds roll in, the temperature drops, it becomes windy like it is now, but this is a little Ackie, and this guy is just a little juvenile. So Ackies have a really large range here in Australia. They range from the very, very far north, and including the islands off the coast of Darwin, all the way down to Alice Springs and all the way across to Western Australia. They have a really huge range here in Australia. And there's a lot of morphological and color differences to these Ackies depending on where within their range you're finding them. Those found here in the outback in this red soil can be very deep brick red color, hence red Ackies. But further north, they can be brown or tan or yellow, and those are the ones that we're kind of call yellow Ackies. But it's important to know that between yellow Ackies and red Ackies, there's no difference really. It's a color variant of the same lizard. They're both acanthurus. And so there's no difference on a species level between red Ackies and yellow Ackies. They're all different color variants of the same lizard. But the differences in morphology doesn't stop at color. So red specimens may have longer tails than yellows in some areas, and red Ackies also grow larger than yellows and have a more distinct head pattern, which is pretty much absent in the yellow Ackie. They also occupy different habitats within their range. So Ackies from tropical areas up north, they're living in the trees. They're pretty arboreal, but here in the outback, they're primarily living a subterranean life in burrows that they dig under rocks or termite mounds. And that's where we found this guy. But again, they do have a lot of color variance depending on where within their range you're finding them. And I just heard that there's actually a population of these, I think on an island off the coast of Darwin, where they are completely jet black. Now that I know about that population, I've got to try to find out where they are and get there on another visit here to Australia. But for now, I'm going to concentrate on these red Ackies. Now these monitor lizards are actually called spiny or ridge-tailed monitors, and they have a spiny base to their tail, and that's where they get their name spiny-tailed monitors. But kind of like how we call Uromastyx instead of dab lizards, nobody really uses dab lizards, we kind of use the nickname based on their scientific name, and that's where Ackie comes from Varanus acanthurus. All right, so this is a different part of the outback desert, and right over here are some rocks, and I've just found a burrow where an Ackie is probably hanging out right now. All right, so this right here is an Ackie burrow, and what they do is they burrow underneath the rocks, and in the heat of the day like this, they're going to spend most of their time in a burrow like this to escape the intense heat out here in the desert, but also it's more humid, obviously, in these burrows than it is out here in the dry air. So excavating this burrow a little bit more and sticking the humidity gauge in there, we can now see that it's almost 90% humidity in that burrow, and still it's 105 degrees. There, it just hit 90% humidity in this burrow. And if I take the temperature probe out and let it sit in the air for just a second here, you can see that that's going all the way down into the teens, and it's still 103 degrees out here. So I stick it back in, and you can see that humidity just skyrocket, but the temperature doesn't fluctuate that much, which is actually surprising. So that is actually pretty surprising data, that outside right now, the ambient humidity is in the teens. It's about 18%. Down in that burrow, not even very far down in that burrow, the humidity rises to 90%. So as far as hide boxes are concerned, I would mimic the rocks out here that they're living in and have different layered structures of hide boxes. And when you go to mist your enclosures, mist directly within those hide boxes to increase that humidity within those hides, because that is where your Ackie is going to retreat to get that humidity that they so need out here. All right, so right now it's about 4:30 in the afternoon, the intense heat of the day when the Ackies are going underground to their humid hides is kind of over, and they're starting to come out and bask on the top of these rocks behind me. So this is a perfect time of day to start walking these rocky outcroppings to see the Ackies out basking on top of their rocks. So if an Ackie is basking on a rock like this at this time of day when they start to come out to bask, that rock is still 110 degrees Fahrenheit where these Ackies are out basking in it. 110 degrees Fahrenheit is 43 degrees Celsius. And I'll just take some more readings over here on rocks like this. That one is also 110 degrees Fahrenheit. 111 degrees on that one. And the ground itself is 106. So these rocks here are a few degrees warmer than the ground itself. So that's what the basking temperatures are on these rocks where these Ackies are hanging out, but the ambient air temperature is going to be a little bit different. So is the humidity. So it's about 15 to 16% relative humidity, and it's 37.9 degrees Celsius ambient air temperature, which is 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is the ambient temperature that these Ackies are out here basking in. So we've been out here for a couple of days traveling from Darwin down to Alice Springs, which is the extreme northern part of the Ackies range to the extreme southern part of the Ackies range here in Northern Territories. And I've kind of shown off a couple of the varied habitats that Ackies like to live in. So let's talk a little bit about substrate. Ackies love to dig and burrow, and there really isn't a perfect substrate manufactured for burrowing monitors. So for the substrate, you can get pretty creative with mixing what commercially available substrates there are, like sand, dirt, shredded coconut. So with all this information in mind, when it comes time for your enclosures at home and how you design them, just make sure that the bottom of the cage has a basin big enough to hold at least 6 to 9 inches of the substrate, so that when your Ackie naturally digs through that, the substrate is packed enough for them to dig a burrow, but it also holds in that necessary humidity that the Ackies need inside their burrows. So as we've seen from the readings out here in the outback, in your enclosures, the ambient temperature should range from about 100 degrees, which is about 38 degrees Celsius, on the warm end, to the low 80s Fahrenheit on the cool end, which is about 20 degrees Celsius. They like a hot basking spot on the warm end, and as you could see out here, the hot spots out here are about 120 degrees. But some keepers will keep them hotter than that, ranging from 140 to 170 degrees, which is 60 to 76 degrees Celsius. But that is only the temperatures in their basking spots. And so when you're dealing with hot spots that hot, there's the concern about thermal burns. Well, that's why it's important to keep the ambient temperature at about 100 within your enclosures, because any cooler, they're going to sit under those hot spots and try to heat up for a lot longer than is really healthy for them to do so, and that's when those thermal burns occur. So be sure to test the temperatures within your cool spot and your hot spot, and keep the ambient at about 100 degrees so that they can go to those really intense hot spots, warm up and bask as they like, but the rest of the enclosure is warm enough that they're not constantly going back to that hot spot because the rest of the enclosure is too cold. And again, sitting under those hot spots for far too long, and that's where we run into problems with thermal burning from them sitting under those hot spots for way too long. Before I came on this trip, I went online and I bought a UV meter just for this video to show what the UV readings are out here in the Ackies range. And as soon as I got out here, I pulled it out of its case and used it for the first time. I tested it back in Minnesota, but I used it for the first time here, and it's broken. So I'm not going to be able to test any of the UV readings out here because I bought a UV meter from a company that just, let's just face it, they screwed us all. They screwed us all. There's plenty of information on UV for Ackies online. I will put a couple of links in the description below. I'm actually really upset that I bought this specifically to show the UV ratings out here in the wild, and it's broken before I even get a chance to use it. So this is another type of habitat for the red Ackies a little further down the road here. So you've got this desolate landscape, and it's really this red sandy soil that Australia is really known for, but in the middle of it you have these rock outcroppings that just pop up out of nowhere. And in these rocky outcroppings like this are where the Ackies are living in this scenario. So this time of year, the rainy season has just begun. That's good and that's bad. It's been dry for a long time, but the first rains that came over the past couple of days, it's reduced the temperature down into the teens Celsius, which is in the 60s, and it's cold and it's wet and it's windy out here. And unfortunately, that doesn't make for the best conditions to find Ackies. If it was sunny out here right after the rains, they'd all be out on these rocks basking. However, with the temperature being what it is out here, you know, we're gonna have to look in between all the crevices and see if one is just kind of hanging out. They're not gonna be out basking in this. So here's an Ackie burrow right here. And in this kind of temperature, they'll just kind of come out and sit on the outskirts of these little burrows here. And that's how we're gonna find Ackies in this temperature, in these conditions. But that is definitely an Ackie burrow here under this giant rock. Again, in the middle of this desolate environment. So also look at this. All the trees here, they're all still burnt out from the recent fires here in Australia. So again, in this habitat scenario, you've got this red sandy soil, and then you've got these islands of boulders like this. And it's in these boulder islands in the middle of this sandy, desolate environment that the Ackies are living out their lives. So right now I'm about 20 kilometers north of Alice Springs, which is pretty much in the center of Australia. And this is the extreme southern part of the red Ackies range. But just look at this amazing habitat. You've got these brush areas here that provide tons of cover. This is spinifex grass. This is everywhere in the outback. This is like cactus grass. But this cliff face right here is a perfect habitat for red Ackies. They have everything that they need there. They have cover, they have security, they have plenty of food. This is a wash down here, so in the rainy season they have plenty of water. They have everything they need in this kind of habitat to live very successful lives out here in the outback. So Ackies are monitor lizards that have multiple clutches of eggs throughout the year, and as such, Ackies, especially females, need to consume a lot of food to maintain the body weight necessary for those kinds of multiple clutches. So studies on wild Ackies have shown that their stomach contents have a large amount of arthropods, beetles, cockroaches, and even lizards were the main prey items. And because of the high temperatures that they live in, these monitors have really speedy metabolisms and therefore should be fed at least 5 to 7 times per week, and younger animals need to be fed daily. So insects such as crickets, waxworms, mealworms, roaches, they make up the bulk of the diet in captives. And in the breeding season with your females, you can even feed them the occasional pinky or frozen thawed ground turkey to really beef them up during the breeding season. But be careful, because adults have been known to become obese when fed pinkies more than 3 to 4 times a week. And with your males, you can feed them bits of fish or scrambled eggs to increase their protein intake as well. But out here in the wild, these are primarily insect eaters with the occasional lizard to increase that protein that both males and females can benefit from. So rattlers, Ackies are one of the most commonly kept and the most popular monitor lizards, and they really are the perfect beginner monitor. So You know, I'll tell you, I absolutely love the Outback. This is one of my favorite places on the planet, except for these little flying bastards everywhere. So before these flies absolutely drive me insane, I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of my Patreon supporters. It's with your help that I can come out here and make videos like this and stand in the middle of the Outback, swatting flies, waving my arms around like an absolute crazy person. But I wanted to thank each and every one of you for being a Patreon supporter. If you'd like to become a Patreon supporter, that link is in the description below. Also, while you're down there, visit our sponsors. Their link is in the description below as well. And as always with these In the Wild videos, leave a comment below with a tip or a technique on how you guys are keeping your Ackies so that other people can learn from you as well. And until the next reptile adventure from here in Australia, love the planet, feed your reptile obsession, and rattle on.